Hi everyone. So I feel as if I've got to preface this video with a statement for those of you who've never seen my videos before. I am not a Trump supporter. I have never been a Trump supporter, and I probably never will be. However, I will be defending him quite a lot in this video. So if you are a Trump supporter, don't immediately switch off. I'm going to be defending the guy quite a bit. And if you're a Hillary supporter or diehard DNC supporter, please don't call me a Trump supporter or Trump tard or anything like that. A, you would be wrong, and B, it would just make you look foolish. And you'd even look even more foolish if you called me a Putin puppet or something like that, because I'm going to stick to facts in this video, and you can't argue with facts. So last week I did a video on BBC and their flagship news program Newsnight, because they covered or did a 20-minute segment on the alleged poisoning or Russian poisoning of Sergei Skripal in the UK in Salisbury, and how I thought it was best summed up with this statement. It is arse gravy of the worst kind. I love that, but I'm a child. Over the weekend, the BBC, following on from that debacle, aired an hour-long documentary called Conspiracy Files: Murder in Washington, all about the murder of Seth Rich. Now, this really piqued my interest because I was curious as to just how the BBC were going to try and spin this, considering what a bad job they'd done on Newsnight of the poisoning of this British spy in Salisbury. And it was a British spy, by the way, not a Russian spy. He was spying for us, not the other way around. Very, very important that we get that correct. Anyway, I digress. So in June of 2016, near the end of the Democratic primary between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, the Democratic National Committee's server was breached, and we found out a few weeks later that thousands and thousands of their private emails and emails between them had been stolen. A few days after this breach happened, the Washington Post reported that the Russians did it, Governor. It was Russian hackers that had hacked in and stolen whatever. It didn't actually come out at that time exactly what had been stolen. Though it was just, they haven't really stolen anything. But anyway, a few weeks later, Seth Rich unfortunately was killed. Now, how it happened was he went out drinking at his local bar. He was there until about 1:30 in the morning, and he decided to walk home. Now, his walk home from the bar to where he lived was about 30 to 45 minutes. However, he left at 1:30, and then his body was found pretty close to his apartment or where he lived at about 4:20. So there's 3 hours there that are pretty much unaccounted for, although he was speaking to his girlfriend at some stage during that walk home. I'm not sure whether he was on the phone to her when he was shot, but somebody else can verify that. To be honest, I'm trying to stick to the facts of what I know here. So he was found shot in the back twice. He had his watch, he had his wallet, he had his gold chain, he had his phone, all of those things on him. His phone was in his hand. And when the police got there, because they've got something in Washington that identifies when there's a gunshot in the area, and the police were there pretty quickly, I believe within 3 minutes. He was still alive. He was taken to hospital, but unfortunately he died. Now, the police have since said that two people were accosted him in what they called a botched robbery. Now, other people have said, well, it's not a robbery because he's got his wallet and his phone. No. That would be a robbery. A botched robbery is when they don't take anything. Or, well, I suppose you could say a botched robbery is when somebody gets shot. But anyway, they're saying it was a botched robbery and there was two people that did it. 12 days after Rich was killed, WikiLeaks released the stolen DNC emails. Now, this was just huge, as it basically proved what Bernie Sanders supporters were saying all along, that the Democratic establishment were not impartial and fair like they say they are in the rules, but they were openly trying to kneecap Sanders' campaign and were totally biased in favour of Hillary Clinton, just like the Sanders supporters had been saying for months. Now, despite the turmoil that was happening at the time, just 4 days after this release of the emails, Hillary Clinton secured the nomination, the Democratic nomination for the 2016 presidential race. In the documentary, it stated correctly that some right-wing sites then started to speculate as to what happened to Seth Rich, why he was killed, and why he could have been the source of the stolen emails. However, in the documentary, they failed to mention, I believe, yeah, they failed to mention that the left-wing sites were doing it as well. It wasn't just right-wing conspiracy sites. Everybody was talking about it. It was a massive, massive story. Especially as what happened next really turbocharged these stories massively, and that was when Julian Assange, the main man at WikiLeaks, did an interview on Danish TV, and unprompted and unscripted and without being asked about it at all, just brought up Seth Rich's name out of the blue. Well, you can see for yourself what he said here.
Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material, and often very significant risks. As a 27-year-old works for the DNC, who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
No, there's no finding. So
what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
But why make the suggestion?
So just in case you missed something there, I'm going to zoom in on it again. Watch what he does when he's asked the question. There's a definite nod there.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean...
So, Julian Assange there, there's no argument about it. He has come out and he's all but said, listen, it wasn't a hack, it was a leak. These documents came from Seth Rich. That is pretty much everybody agrees with that. To be honest, I don't think anybody is arguing against that at the moment. So theories about Rich started really gaining momentum after this happened. And the news was full of how social media was instrumental in the closing weeks of the election, especially any stories that mentioned Julian Assange or WikiLeaks. Now, so far in the documentary from the BBC, everything that I have just said to you, they reported. It's pretty much factual. And then they went on to talk about this guy, Jack Berkman, who approached Richie's parents around that time and offered to help find the killers. And he started looking for answers and clues. He started knocking on doors with the help of people. He set up press conferences for Seth Rich's parents to talk and ask questions. And I believe he even set up a reward of $120,000 of his own money for anybody who come forward with information that led to the capture of these killers. Now, that was in the documentary. On a side note here, this is my personal opinion. Berkman is an absolute wanker. I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. I really couldn't. He's the sort of guy, if you ask me, who would push his grandmother down the stairs if it meant that he would get into the public eye and maybe 5 minutes on Fox News. He's that sort of self-serving prick. That's my point of view. It's my honest opinion of the guy. If you disagree with it, that's fine. We don't need to argue about it. It's just what I feel. And so Jack Berkman gets involved. Now, in the documentary, up until this point, we're about 27 minutes in. Okay, everything that I've said to you has covered about 27 minutes of the documentary. And so far, there's nothing really I disagree with too much in it. It's pretty much accurate as I have stated to you. But to be honest, on reflection, everything I've said to you is fact. Nobody is really disputing any of this, what I've said to you so far at all. So the BBC pretty much had to report as is for the first 27 minutes. It started going downhill pretty quickly though, and it started going downhill when this lady, Melissa Ryan, who was captioned here as a political analyst, appeared in the video at about the 27-minute mark, and this is what she said.
The Trump campaign is trying to distract from the Russia story. They are trying to negate the Russia story. They are very much trying to keep the DNC hacks about the content and gossip that's in the emails and not about the fact that Russia may have hacked the DNC, which that is a huge story, a foreign country interfering in an American presidential election. And it's potentially a disastrous story for the Trump campaign. They're going to do better if Democrats are continually divided and fighting, and sowing doubt about the Seth Rich case is a great way to do that, and partly because one of the things that Sanders supporters believed is that the DNC rigged the election for Hillary, and the emails play into that. Imagery of Seth became pretty common. There was a mythology built around who he was, fighting against Hillary on the inside and doing his patriotic duty, and that he was really a Trump supporter all along. And just so much play of him as an American hero, but also as a very mythologized version.
So she's implying there that the Trump team were trying to hide something, that there's a chance that the Trump campaign was in collusion with the Russians and Vladimir Putin and was doing everything it could to deflect away from that. And the fact is, while the Trump team was under attack from the DNC and the liberal media at the time with these allegations, there was zero proof of it. And to this day, there is still zero proof of it. And what was really the big issue at the time was not how the emails came to the public's attention, but the content in them. The emails proved that the DNC had been lying to their own supporters all along in a coordinated attempt to secure the nomination for Hillary Clinton. It wasn't the Trump team which were deflecting away from any Russian collusion. It was the DNC, Hillary Clinton, and the corporate media who were doing the deflecting away from the emails by pushing the Russian collusion narrative as hard as possible. So her framing there has got it the wrong way around, and that's really important because from here on in, the framing of the documentary really does take a left turn for the worst. So she went on to say there that there was a mythology surrounding Seth Rich by this stage and that it was the Trump team who were pushing it. While that may be true also, as it certainly was the case that the Trump team kept bringing up the emails, this didn't stoke the fire for the Bernie wing to be talking about it either. The divide wasn't stoked by the Trump team. The divide came from the content in the emails again. The Bernie wing were pissed. They were mad as hell. And to be quite honest, they had a bloody good reason to be, if you ask me. And at this point, it's clear to see the documentary where it was going. It was a blatant attempt from here on in to paint Trump and his supporters as the bad guys who were dividing the Democratic support, and the Democratic National Committee, to be honest, had done that all on their own by cheating and lying their way to nominating their chosen one, Hillary Clinton. Then, this girl, Melissa, she stated that people were saying that Seth Rich was a Trump supporter all along. But that was not the case for the most part. Sure, there were a couple of stories saying that maybe he was, and maybe a couple of Reddit threads. But the majority of the people who were talking about this, especially among Sanders supporters, was that Seth Rich was a patriot who loved his country. This is an iconic photo of him in his Stars and Stripes outfit, who had become disillusioned with the Clinton campaign and their cheating, and had leaked the emails to expose the corruption, not because he was a secret Trump supporter. So that framing was a little bit wrong as well. Now, whether that story is true or not, nobody really knows. However, it was how the Bernie wing of the DNC especially saw it at the time, and many still do to this day. Now, the narrator of the program after this did allude to what I've just said very quickly after Melissa had said her piece. But again, they spent the majority of time with Melissa making her case, and then the narrator said, about 5 seconds worth. I'll play it just after I've stopped speaking because the next bit is important as well. Because the documentary at this stage concentrated on Cassandra Fairbanks. Now, up until probably the last 2 weeks, I didn't actually know who Cassandra Fairbanks was. The only reason she came to my attention was because of last week's vigil for Julian Assange when he had his internet cut off at the Ecuadorian embassy, and there was this big 10-hour long vigil, and for the most part, like 95% of the people who were on there I followed on Twitter, and she was one of I think 2 people that I didn't follow. So I followed her, and I started reading a little bit of her stuff and that sort of thing, just investigating, because she seemed like she was a very intelligent and clued up person with regards to this story especially, and anything to do with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Now, the interesting thing is here, when they introduced Cassandra to the program, you'll see in the clip coming up that they introduce her with a caption that she's a social media personality. Now, that's not the case at all. She's a journalist. She's bloody everywhere. She's on so many different websites and outlets, it's unreal. You can see that, a selection of them coming up right now. But they framed her in this documentary as a social media personality to push their story. The story that social media voices won the election for Trump, and the reach and that sort of thing. Now, Cassandra alluded to this in a Twitter post last night. She was saying that the media kept asking her time and time again about her reach and how many people that she was influencing, and you could see that they kept asking her these questions to create the narrative that they wanted to portray. Now, to be fair, I must say this to Melissa, that may have happened with her as well. So I don't want to paint Melissa in a bad light at all. Even though, okay, she was wrong on a few things, she may have done a 2-hour interview and been absolutely 100% correct on everything else she said. But they just put that bit in of her because it, again, fit the narrative that the documentary makers were trying to make. I hope that makes sense. I'm not coming down on Melissa at all, really. So this is the next segment, and pay particular attention to the way they're framing Cassandra Fairbanks here.
Hi guys. So I get asked the same.
Even some Democrats, especially those who had supported Bernie Sanders, felt the Seth Rich story spoke to them.
I was really unhappy with the DNC. I think that the things that came out in the WikiLeaks emails were horrible, and it's not the way I think that a party should be run. It was just so unfair, and I was like, I don't want to support these people. So I had started to look into Trump a little more seriously, and so I was just like, all right, let's do this. Trump it is. Like, I put on a Trump hat and tweeted a picture. Yeah, it just kind of snowballed. I don't really know. When you go on Twitter every day, you can see how many people you reached in the last 24 hours, and mine is usually around 1 million for the day. When you have people who have as many followers as I do tweeting out the same kind of messages, it adds up. There's, a lot of people who are seeing this stuff and asking questions themselves.
Do you see what they did there? It's very nuanced the way they've done it, and they've obviously spent a lot of time on this video, whereas with the Novichok one, I think that must have been put together in next to no time, because this one, it's very, very clever. They are intentionally blaming independent voices like Cassandra, and the fact that these independent voices, some of them have large followings, they are blaming these people for challenging an establishment narrative by questioning and asking questions of an open murder case where Julian Assange has basically said the guy was the one he got the documents from, it's their fault now. It's these social media. What was it they called her? A social media personality. They're the problem. It's very nuanced the way they do it. And if you haven't been covering the media as in depth as I have over the last 2 years, it's really easy to miss. And now watch what they do next, because not only are they blaming these independent media people and the fact that they've got large followings for the fact that Trump got elected, now all of a sudden they change from, well, it could have been a leak and we don't know who the hack was, to it was definitely a hack and it was Russia.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
But as the new president took office,
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
a cloud hung over his shock victory: the hacking of the Democrat emails. And in a tense interview, President Trump was quick to deny any involvement.
According to the Washington Post, the CIA has concluded that Russia intervened in the election to help you win the presidency. Your reaction?
I think it's ridiculous. I think it's just another excuse. I don't believe it. I don't know why. It's all fake news. It's phony stuff. It didn't happen. It was a group of opponents that got together, sick people, and they put that crap together.
You have seen this around everything with the Trump campaign and the Trump administration. Whenever something bad happens for the Trump campaign, and certainly the idea that Russia was helping the Trump campaign by hacking the DNC would have been very bad news. They go into overdrive trying to create alternative narratives, trying to create so much confusion that it's hard for consumers of news to even know what's happening.
So the first half of this video was factual. It's things that they can't defer away from because they can be proven. Now they're moving into the realms of make-believe, because Russia hacking the DNC is unproven. We've seen no proof of it. The only people that we've heard anything from, proof-wise, is the CIA. And as we know, the CIA have about 60 or 70 years history of lying to the world and the American public time after time after time after time after time. So I don't believe a goddamn word the CIA say unless I see the evidence in front of me, and I know that there are millions of people around the world who feel the same way, because the cat's out of the bag. We've been through Iraq WMDs. We know how much of a lying group of bastards they are. It's as simple as that. And also, we've now seen them laying the groundwork in Great Britain for the silencing of the social media voices. Facebook have already done it. They've stopped the pages showing up in news feeds. Twitter suppressing hashtags. YouTube demonetizing independent media and making videos even harder to find. And now all of a sudden, with this documentary, what's going to happen next is exactly what happened in America. The character assassinations. And first on the chopping block in this documentary is a guy called Ed Bukowski.
Now more than ever, the new Trump presidency needed a distraction. And the Seth Rich story was about to take another twist as a new player entered the game.
Ed Bukowski is a businessman in Texas. We don't really know exactly why he was interested. He just says he had interest in the case, but we know he did have ties to the current administration. He's kind of like this guy behind the scenes funding an investigation into Seth Rich and his murder.
We don't know exactly why Ed Bukowski became interested. Really? That's not difficult to figure out, because he sat down and did an interview with none other than Cassandra Fairbanks. Oh, the way they we don't know why. It's not difficult to find out. I'll leave a link to the full video of the interview he did with Cassandra down below. If you are interested, watch it. And if you want to find out whether Ed Bukowski is, a decent, honest person, just watch the video. I don't think you would come across many people who are more honest and caring and just empathic than this guy. He really does seem like the real deal. Let's listen to what Ed says about why he got involved in the case.
But what had occurred is a friend of mine had come back from London and had some information that this one individual, and this is the one area where I'm not sharing names, okay, wanted that information to be shared with the Rich family because that person thought it might help them find out who had murdered their son. So I got them on the phone and I shared with them the information that this man had wanted them to know. And what I told them was that I was told that your sons downloaded the emails from the DNC server and sold them to WikiLeaks. And Mr. Rich said, and I didn't see him, it was over the phone, he was like, Ed, we already know that. That's not new information to us. I said, oh, I had no idea. I thought this might have been helpful. That's why I felt a need to share it with you. He says, Ed, we know what our sons did. What we want to do is focus on who murdered our sons. Those were the exact words. We don't want to talk about WikiLeaks. We don't want to talk about the DNC and emails. None of that. We want to focus on who murdered our son. That's what matters to us. What's happened in the past is in the past.
So, not only have they said in the documentary, oh, we don't know, nobody knows why Ed Batowski got involved. Well, you can clearly see that Ed Batowski is not hiding the reasons why he got involved. But also, they just totally not put in the documentary that Ed Batowski says Seth Rich's parents know that Seth Rich was the leaker of the documents to WikiLeaks. They haven't put Ed Batowski, his statement, in there at all. But they dedicated a massive amount of this documentary to Jack Berkman. And he makes another appearance in a second. First of all, the rest of the documentary, the next segment of it, was Batowski hires Rod Wheeler, a private investigator, and brings in Malia Zimmerman, who is an investigative journalist on Fox News. And while they are both investigating the case, Batowski takes a back seat. Now, the next thing that happens in the timeline was this slime ball. Jack Berkman comes back into the limelight with some progress.
Berkman had received emails from a Russian man called Dmitry, who claimed to have vital information.
Dmitry is a gentleman who approached us out of the blue. He claims he had the answer to the Seth Rich murder mystery. He said that he knows someone, I won't get into names, high up in a state-controlled company who's close to Putin in Russia, who coordinated the murder of Seth. He said the focus should now be on finding Seth Rich killers. Yes. Once again, I am not interested in the 100K reward as I fear being killed myself if I come out publicly. So his whole thing is he wants to be paid privately. Two men trailed the victim for days before executing their mission. Their names are in our files. Now, no more questions. Let me just get to work in the next 16 hours for me to retrieve everything for you. I am privy to this information by virtue of my work, and I have two first-hand sources, one ready to travel all the way from Moscow to share with you his insight. It's very clear to me he really believes what he's saying is true. And he thinks he knows the people at the top of the food chain who coordinated this.
Seems legit. Seems totally plausible, that does. What an idiot. So he then goes on the local Fox 5 news show and even takes out an ad asking for more information with a Russian translation. This really does annoy Seth Rich's parents, obviously, and Mr. and Mrs. Rich were deeply offended by it and asked him to stop investigating the case and stop what he was doing. Of course, with him being such a narcissist and self-serving prick, he didn't.
So I asked him point blank, if Mary Rich asked you to stop, would you? He couldn't answer that question. He just said, that's a really good question. It's very clear that Mary Rich has asked him to stop, and he hasn't.
So the next bit of the documentary, they bring up James Comey's testimony that he's admitting that the FBI are investigating any possible collusion with the Russians by the Trump team during the election. And then they come to Wheeler and Batowski meeting with Sean Spicer in the White House. Take a look.
Dallas businessman Ed Butowski and private investigator Rod Wheeler arranged a meeting inside the White House with the president's press secretary, Sean Spicer.
I think when we learned that Rod Wheeler had gone into the White House with Ed Butowski to meet with Sean Spicer, that's absolutely stunning.
And it's around this time, too, that Butowski starts telling Wheeler that President Trump is aware of the story and wants it to come out and has a keen interest in his investigation.
The next 2 minutes and 15 seconds of this BBC documentary about Seth Rich, remember, Russia is mentioned 8 times, and they are making the case that Trump is trying to take the focus away from the Russia investigation by pushing the Seth Rich theory. Something that everybody is talking about online. Everybody. Then we come to Melia Zimmerman, who publishes her now infamous story on Fox.
On the 16th of May 2017, the Fox News website published Butowski's story. It was written by Malia Zimmerman and reported that an FBI source had new evidence to prove Seth had indeed been the DNC email leaker.
Malia Zimmerman's story said that according to an unnamed federal source, there was direct proof on Seth Rich's computer that he had sent something like 40,000 emails to WikiLeaks. So it was a smoking gun.
The story quoted private investigator Rod Wheeler as confirming the email exchanges, and he went on Washington's local Fox 5 News to publicize the story.
The answer to solving his death lies on that computer, which I believe is either at the police department or either at the FBI. I've been told both.
But you have sources at the FBI saying that there is information
For
that
sure.
could link Seth Rich to WikiLeaks?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's confirmed.
So that same evening that interview was taken, Hannity runs the story on Fox, and it's obviously big news. But a week later, the story has to be retracted, or at least Zimmerman's story was retracted because the FBI denied all knowledge of an investigation into Seth Rich's murder. Rod Wheeler, who you just saw there, saying he's got a source at the FBI who has said to him that there's evidence on the computer that links Seth Rich to WikiLeaks. Rod Wheeler now says he never said. And he's started, I know he's started one lawsuit against Fox, saying that the White House were the ones pushing the story. And I think there's another couple of lawsuits that have been started recently as well. One by Seth Rich brother against the Washington Post. The rest of the documentary is just slamming independent media. That's all they're doing. They're slamming independent media. They bring up H.A. Goodman a couple of times. They allude to him in video clips. And H.A. Goodman, as we know, is a pretty reliable source, especially on anything anti-Hillary Clinton. And then they bring up Jack Bertman again, and the fact that Jack Bertman is doing this reenactment, a video reenactment, and trying to keep himself in the limelight. That's all really he cares about, but that again is my opinion. Other people may have a different opinion, and that's okay. And then they go on to close the documentary like this.
The 2016 election will be stamped as the first fake news election. In the middle of all this, Seth was used as a political pinball by the political animals that don't typically get airtime. Parasites who will completely disregard a grieving family and a set of facts in order to try and create an air of doubt rooted in conspiracy theory.
So the first 27 minutes of that documentary, I cannot argue with at all. They stuck to the facts and they reported things as is, pretty much 99% of it. So I can't argue with the first 27 minutes. The last 33 minutes, They didn't report on, well, although they reported on some of the facts that happened and told the story, it was interlaced with segments and narrated in a way that's designed to just discredit anything that takes the focus away from the Russian collusion narrative that they're pushing. That's all the BBC were doing in that documentary. That's all really they care about, is just anything to do with Russia. Same as by pushing the Skripal case. They just care about any evidence that says Russia did it and ignore anything that is contrary to it. They created an image in that documentary that online journalism and independent media personalities are all untrustworthy and publish false stories and conspiracy theories. That's not the case. For the most part, they're just asking questions. And they're asking questions about an open murder case. That's all. They just want to get to the truth. And in the documentary as well, they spent a lot of time on the one story that was retracted that Fox did. How many stories have had to be retracted over the last 18 months about Russia collusion? How many people have been fired? And then they were trying to say, oh, it's the fake news is the online people at the end there. They were trying to say the fake news and saying that they were parasites. They're just trying to stick up for their establishment media when they have lied to us constantly for 18 months. And you know the one media outlet that has never, ever had to retract a story is WikiLeaks. They have never had to retract a story, they've never had to edit a story, and as far as I'm aware, they have never lied to us. So when the head of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, comes out and basically all but says Seth Rich was the person we got these DNC emails from, then why would anybody not believe him? Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked it. Please subscribe and please click the bell. You have to click the bell, otherwise you will not find the videos in your newsfeed. YouTube have admitted that. Please support independent media. Please. We need your help. We really do. That's not just me. My Patreon link and PayPal is down there. We need your help, because otherwise we're just not going to be able to survive, especially under this onslaught from documentaries like the BBC have just done. Until next time, peace and take care.